Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. As you have read and pointed out, today's agenda has 46 nominees for the committee to vote on, 44 judicial nominees, as well as Bill Barr for Attorney General. All of them will be held over, but I do want to briefly address Mr. Barr's nomination and the pace of moving nominees through the committee. As I noted at the hearing, I'm very concerned about Mr. Barr's memo on Special Counsel Mueller's investigation into obstruction of justice. The weekend before the hearing, I spent Saturday and Sunday on that 19-page memo, written approximately 6 months before he was nominated for his position. I read it, I studied it carefully. I have never seen anything like it. 5 months before being nominated, Mr. Barr wrote that 19-page memo that outlined a comprehensive argument defending the unitary executive. In his memo, Mr. Barr made clear that an all-powerful president can fire executive officials and direct prosecutions, including when the investigation may implicate the president himself or his interests. This memo is of serious concern to me and appears to be seminal in his appointment to this position. If this view is applied in the current context, there would be little check on the president's actions. We have seen historically what can happen when a president has tried to interfere with law enforcement investigations, from Watergate to the U.S. attorney firings. It's important to note the president, while having significant discretion over hirings and firings and directing the executive branch, does have limits. In addition, Mr. Barr argues, for example, that, quote, conflict of interest laws do not and cannot apply to the president, end quote, and that, quote, the Constitution itself places no limit on the president's authority to act on matters which concern him or his own conduct, end quote. That's something that should trouble all of us, and is why I have focused so many of my questions at the hearing on the memo and the Mueller investigation. I was pleased Mr. Barr committed, without reservation, Mr. Chairman, that Special Counsel Mueller is allowed to complete his investigation without interference. However, I remain concerned about what Mr. Barr outlined in his memo on limits to the scope of what Counsel Mueller can pursue. As Mr. Barr noted, his memo focused squarely on the obstruction of justice. Yet, last week, the Mueller team issued indictments for another individual affiliated with the Trump campaign that specifically addressed obstruction of justice. I'm troubled by the idea that the individual seeking to oversee this investigation has predetermined whether allegations can even be pursued. I'm also concerned about whether Mr. Barr will make the Mueller report available. When I first asked him about this, he gave a strong answer about the need to provide information and his commitment to as much transparency as possible. However, as the hearing continued, Mr. Barr's answers seemed to become more qualified. He began making a distinction between reporting on potential disagreements with Mr. Mueller and the final report on Mueller's findings and recommendations. Mr. Barr also seemed to indicate he would write a separate report that he would provide to Congress instead of Mr. Mueller's report as submitted. That needs to be fleshed out, and we need to know whether this is in fact how he is going to proceed. I hope it is not. This is the biggest issue facing our country, and the American people deserve to know Mueller's findings and analysis without any filter. My Republican colleagues have suggested that the special counsel's regulations prohibit the Justice Department for providing the special counsel's report to Congress. That is not the case. The regulations require the special counsel to provide, quote, a confidential report, end quote, to the Attorney General. Those regulations do not prohibit him from sharing this report with Congress. To the contrary, as part of its oversight responsibility, Congress's requests and the Congress requests and the Justice Department provides confidential information related to closed investigations all the time. In fact, over the past 2 years, the majority has frequently sought and received confidential information related to several investigations of Hillary Clinton. For example, the majority has asked for witness interview transcripts, classified appendices to the Justice Department IG report, as well as classified documents from the Treasury Department and the FISA court. Special Counsel Mueller's final report and information about his investigation should be treated no differently. I have written to Mr. Barr asking him to clarify his position on the Mueller report. I have not yet received a response, and I would, at this time, like to submit that letter to the record. If you have
Without objection. And now's a good time to take up the Gang of Eight bill.
Can I finish?
They're all gone.
Oh.
Okay, good.
Well, maybe when I stop, they'll come back.
All in favor?
As
Unanimous consent, without objection.
Perfect.
He'll come back in a minute.
well, let me make the point, because whether people like it or not, I think these are important points. As I mentioned at the beginning of my statement, the committee is also considering 44 judicial candidates that the White House renominated. I understand it's not unprecedented to have a large number of renominees at the beginning of Congress. I'm concerned that the committee has been moving, though, at such a pace and without the traditions that have been in place to ensure proper vetting and strong candidates. For example, 4 circuit court nominees on the agenda lack support from home state senators and do not have their blue slips. It is very clear that when blue slips are honored, administrations, including this one, work with the home state senators. We see this even now on the district courts. One of this committee's most important responsibilities is to review and evaluate the president's nominees for lifetime appointments. I hope this committee will recommit to moving well-qualified consensus nominees. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.